Hello, I'm George Gonzalez, and I'm obsessed with making games. I'm a VR developer, and my goal is to help you finish your games. So today we're going to talk about saving and loading. And most often, when it is mentioned, it is brought up with player prefs. But I want to talk about saving and loading permanently, so that you can have a finished game. Because that's my focus: is finished games that you can publish and you can make money from. Today I'm going to show you with PlayFab, but this can be done with any game and any game engine. All you're doing is storing data in a JSON file, and sometimes that can be a little bit daunting. I personally don't like doing backend, but I had to learn because I had to get it done. And so I want to share this with you. So today we're going to talk about inventory items and player data. So any type of data that you want to save for the player. And PlayFab has a nice way of separating the two. Oftentimes, if you have your own, for example, if you use Firebase or any other backend where you store files, or even Unity Cloud, usually you have to create your own structure however you want. PlayFab has a few things that they've done before. Um, so they have economy systems where you can have coins, currency, and then you have inventory items that you can create. Like in this type, we're gonna use it. In this scenario, we're gonna use it for spells. We have spells, and you can add in here to make it worth something. And then PlayFab, what it'll do is it will let the player buy this item for that price. But today I'm not going to talk about all the inventory items and bundles and things that you can do, but we're going to talk about how to store these on in Unity. And then the other one that I have here is player data. So if you have a player, um, they'll have in here player data, and you can have player data that's available publicly. You can like read, the client can read and write. You have read only, and you have internal data that you can use. So all these can be used from PlayFab, and some can be done access from the client. But I like to use this one because usually the player data is stuff that the player like could try to hack, but it's just preventing. It's just not going to be good. So this is data that usually, if the player hacks or access it, it's okay. It doesn't matter. Like they can try to change it, but it's not going to do much for them. So the way these are stored is in JSON formats. And oftentimes what happens is you have to either use a JSON class or store information and be able to read and write it. And so you have to create this JSON or some kind of structure to organize the commas and the semicolons or spaces. And sometimes you'll write them wrong, or all kinds of things can happen. Okay. And so instead of trying to format this and create your own JSON, you can have Unity has a JSON, well, Visual Studio, and there's a library that you can use. Okay. And we're going to talk about that to make this whole process easier. And I have the names. So they're storing key value pairs. So the key is a string and the value is a JSON file. It technically is a string, but it's in JSON format. Okay, so I'm gonna show you how to do that. So I use player data to store anything that I need to that's customized for my own needs. And then the items, if I have items that I want the player to use, to own, I use the catalog system on PlayFab. And so, for example, these are spells that the player owns. The other thing that players might own is cosmetics or actual items, and you can add them in here. And I usually use this item class to figure out which type of item they are. So let's dive into first the easy one, because I think player data is the easiest one. If we go in here, access me, player data here. So we're gonna look at that. Okay, so I have a PlayFab handler script, and with this, you can do what you want. Like, let's say you don't want to use PlayFab, you can create a class that reads this data and sends it to Firebase or wherever you want to store it. So let's go over. Let's see. So inventory, there's a load inventory class function. But let's go into the player data. So I have a region. I love using regions for these big classes usually, because then that way I can see everything how I want. So region player data. Okay, so this is how we get the data. Okay, we have the PlayFab ID when he logs in, and then we do get user data. So we do a load player data, but we don't have it yet. Okay, so we initialize these classes that I know we're gonna need, and I'll show you later. We'll come back to them, and everything will make sense as we go. But we have the string. So the key, remember, we stored it in a dictionary, right? With the key value pairs, the key being a string. And so I know we have player loadout, we have player stats, and game progress. Oftentimes people are like, well, how do I save all the data from the game or the scene or where the player's at? These are ways that you can do that. And you can use scriptable objects to keep track of what's what. Okay, so we are gonna go over Let's do local player loadout because that's the one that I'm utilizing the most right now. Local player loadout is basically what it says, the player loadout. What is he equipped, right? So oftentimes, let's say you have a character, you might have certain weapons equipped, specific armor, you have items that you have on you, and then there's the items that you own, right? And so the local player loadout saves the stuff that the player had last time they played. Whether they saved it, or maybe if I want to store things the moment they switch it, or as they pick stuff up and I want to keep progress, this is how I do it. So this is something you do a lot, especially if you're going to save. Whether it's multiplayer or single player, you're going to want to save player data, the loadout. What are they wearing? Or what do they have equipped? Because what happened, and this is if you want persistence, because you can load these on player prefs, and the moment you uninstall the app, those things are gone. They're gone because they erases that data. So again, when you save to the back end, you have it regardless of where you go. So if the player plays on mobile and then goes on and plays in VR or then plays on another device, that stuff is still there from the last gameplay. Okay, save player loadout data. So we load it and we save it. So these are scriptable objects. I load data in and I save data. Okay, and so you'll notice in here there's a JSON utility class, and I save the data into a string that I know is a JSON format, and I go from JSON to string. But this transforms that data into a JSON format. So that way this does all the work for me. But there's a caveat with this. So let's go into this local player scriptable object. Okay, let's go and we'll talk about it. So I use scriptable objects to store data. Usually these are used when you want static variables that you're not changing. This is a local player stat. So I want to go into the local player loadout. Okay, so what do we have in here? Okay, now this is gonna help you make sense of what's going on and why I do things. Okay, I have a public class. The reason why I have this public class is because Unity has a way to serialize class by default. So if I have everything in a neatly public class, you can also serialize it. Like I could try to serialize these things, but again, this is a scriptable object. And so I want to make sure that I have complete control over this without having to worry about the serializer. Okay. So that's why you see a duplicate of things. Again, I'm not a pro with this. I want a disclaimer. This is how I do it. I find this beneficial. Might not be the most efficient, might not be the best, but it gets the job done and it works. Okay. So we have a public class that's going to get serialized. This is what's going to get saved. So there's other things in here that I might not care about getting saved. And so this is specifically what I want saved. The rest is just temp stuff for me. And I might not even save this. This is my currency. I want to store it because I want to be able to store maybe the coins as maybe they haven't stashed them. When you die, it depends. I might not even put it in here. I might not even save it, but I might keep it in the scriptable object because I'm working on a wizard game that's like a dungeon. So I want players to be able to hold the coins as they go into the dungeon, and if they die or they leave and they don't finish the dungeon, they will lose that money. And so in order to do that, I have to store it somewhere. So instead of saving it on the back end and adding coins as you go, I'm going to stash them, and then I'm going to probably erase them from here. So I'm not going to have them here because PlayFab already stores your currency. So I don't need this store. So what I'm going to do is in here, I'm going to have a converter, or like that converts these temp coins into actual currency. And it's going to say, hey, PlayFab, the player at the end of the run, or when he's done, or when he actually saves or reaches a checkpoint, I can then transfer all these currencies that they were stashed in here and actually grant them to the player. So I can do that on the back end. Okay. But I want to help you understand what I'm doing here. Okay. I have the spells, what spells I have loaded. I have the daily, like if you're claiming every day, you might have something like a daily reward. So this is how I keep track of it. I keep the date on a string. I check it every day when they log in and see if it's the same date. I have if they did a review for the game. If they already did it, then I don't need to. They can, they don't get the reward again. So this is to keep track of things that I want to store on the player as they log in. I also have where you can have spells on the left hand as well as the right, and you can unlock that through subscription. So I'm going to have this either locked or unlocked. And as you see, I have the scriptable object, and the scriptable object has a load and a save data. instead of, because I don't want to write straight to it one to one, I want to keep things clean, and I want to say, okay, this guy's going to load the data, and this function is going to save the data. And all it's doing is transferring these values from here into here, and vice versa. Okay. The reason I'm doing that is because when I return this data object on that saved data, it's going to return a class. And that class, with this JSON utility to JSON, it will turn a Unity class into a JSON. And that JSON is a string. So there's the player loadout, and I just save that. Again, we have a dictionary with string, the key value pair. So the key is this, and the value is this. Now this can be changed. I can have an enum if you want, and this is how I do it. If you want to do it separately or differently to make sure the strings match, you want to make sure that these strings match here, right? If I made a mistake and I actually left that R out, it's going to save it like that. And then when I load it, it's not going to load it in. Okay, so you got to be aware of that. That's like, it's a choice. Okay, I just copy paste it. It's right here. I'm not going to make that mistake, but if I want it to be more sure, I can have enums for these classes, for these key value pairs, at least a key. Okay, the main thing, so the save and then the load. Pretty straightforward. And you can do this with any type of thing, like game progress. For example, I can have arrays of integer values. I can have all kinds of things to store. Okay, where's the player at? How many things have they unlocked? The quest. However you want to encrypt it or put it down or store it, you can do that in the class, and then it will save it and it will load it. And the reason why I do this, because one of the cons for scriptable objects is that scriptable objects, if I'm in here, show you, let's look at game, which one is it? The player loadout. So let's say I'm testing the game, right? In the editor, I'm playing, you'll see, let me hit play. There's stuff that I'm working on, but you'll see it populate. So this is going to populate with the things that I'm in the game. You see 100. I have the Fire Blast spell on both sides because I haven't unlocked stuff. Okay, so let's say I add stuff here and I undo. Okay, do you see that all this is stored there right now? So if I hit build, if I build my game right now, this will build with this information in the game, which can be bad. But as you notice, look at this, watch. That can be bad because then players have this information in their game and they might have stuff unlocked, things at different levels. And so when you have scriptable objects, you have to watch out, especially if you're modifying them, because in the editor, these can be like all kinds of bad. Or let me see, there's a 200. And then everybody that loads this game is going to have that many coins. Okay, but I'm going to show you something. When you first load the game, I have this. So worst case scenario, you load a new object. Now, if you have a previous one, whatever's on the database will override my scriptable object. So I'm going to show you right now. Even though I haven't tested, I know this is how it works. Okay, see, it overrode. So when you're using scriptable objects, not saying you should, but this is how I use them. You can load in here, and as long as you're doing the new loadout, so that way, this is to prevent if they have, and you see I have these try catches, in case this fails for some reason, let's say someone messed up with the code, whatever, it will create a new one here and here. So these are things that I've noticed, and that's why I always do this now. Okay, I have this in case they don't have any keys, they don't have anything. This is specifically for PlayFab, and if you're doing inventory. Okay, I like the fact that you can use the player data and use a JSON, because that basically you can do anything you want. You can store any kind of information, and it works really well because it's pretty straightforward. Save, load, scriptable object, make sure it's working, and you're good to go. Now, with inventory, just a quick one, you have this get inventory success, and in PlayFab specifically, it will give you the player virtual currency with the inventory because it's part of that system. And so that's, you read the inventory, you have the virtual currency. Then what I do with the scriptable objects, again, because we don't want any data from before, we clear it. I have this inventory data of everything I own. I clear it in case there's lingering from the previous session or from my stuff that I did in the editor. Whatever it is, I clear it. We go in the back end and we do this for each backend item. Now these are item instance, and there's an issue with PlayFab that gets solved in Economy version 2, but I'm not very well acquainted with that, so I still use the old system. But the problem is that if I change an item on the fly, like on the next update or a different version, that item, once it's stored on the player's inventory, it like duplicates the item, and now it's that. And so it doesn't automatically populate to all the items owned by the players. So let's say I change that spell to be a weapon for some odd reason. Well, the thing that the player owns doesn't have that information. And so you can't go back and forth and update stuff unless you set it up in your system. And so that's why I have the scriptable object. So most of the time, all I use is the item ID and the item class. So let's say, so you could technically store inventory in a string because I use scriptable objects to know what the data is, like what items they're own. And then I have a specific, I'll show you, owned items, inventory data list, inventory. Let's see. So we have this inventory, and this gives me all, like, if I have a scriptable object with the data, this is how I store what that object needs. Okay, so this is the item ID. Okay, this is the display name, the type, the prefab, the icon, anything I want to store on the item, I put it in the scriptable object. And the reason why I do that is because if I want to go back to PlayFab and read what that item is and what it has, or all these values that you might want, like with drop loot and these other things, it's not worth doing because you won't be able to go from the player's inventory and backtrack it because you have to download the whole list. So it's very weird. But what happens is you have the items on the player and the items that are sold, and you would have to download both libraries and check both of them until you find the matching ID, and then grab all the information from the other data from PlayFab. So it's super bad. So instead, I have a scriptable object. I determine what the item is, all the information. That way, when I update this scriptable object, it will update for all the inventory items that the player owns. Okay, that's how I handle that, and that's why I wanted to share that with you in case you have issues with PlayFab. Because what I have is an inventory data list that holds basically the catalog for the whole game. This is where I update the game, and I know I got to do it manually. You could do an automation for it, or you can store the scriptable objects and make sure that the ID matches the name, and then you don't need a data list. You don't need this because you can just find it by path. That's a smart way to do it. But the problem is that you have to be 100% sure that the ID matches the name, and then you can use a resources folder to get to that path. So there's other ways to do it more efficient, but I do it this way because I make sure I can see physically, like I can physically see what the items I have and the items I missed. But as you get bigger the project, you might want to do that. Owned items, this is specifically the IDs that the player owns. And this is what I load from PlayFab. Say, okay, what does the player own actually? And then I go from there. And these are just the spells. And then you can have cosmetics and other type of items that you can filter them through here. But I have also one big dictionary that holds all the items in case I need to grab items one at a time. I can just use the ID to find it. That's pretty much it for inventory. If you have any questions about saving and loading data, let me know what I missed, what you wished I would have talked about or go deeper into. What are your concerns? Or is there anything I missed? I'm here to help you finish your games. So let's go finish your games.